Hello and welcome everyone to this new video about front-end development using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. In this video, we will be doing our front-end using React. In the previous videos, we already made our front-end using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And in the last video, we made a simple backend using Node.js. So in this video, we'll keep this backend as it is. What we will do, we will replace our plain HTML, CSS and JavaScript for the client side with the React framework. So I will start by showing how we can create a React application. Then we will show the basic building blocks for React application, which is components, and how we can do that using the JSX, which is JavaScript and XML. Then I will talk about state hooks and rendering, namely how will React re-render our HTML page based on our provided JSX and hooks. I will also show how to use a React package called router DOM. This router provides component called routes and 3 hooks: useParam, useNavigate, and useLocation. So I will start this tutorial from our physicist's website, and I will make it in 3 different ways. So what you see here on the left is the first way. So this is our website, seems very similar to what we have in the previous video. In this first implementation using React, I will be using one component where I will put all these inputs here, the buttons and the list inside this one file. As you can see here, our file tree in vscode will look something like this, where we only have this app.js, which will contain this whole application here. In the second implementation, you see that I have here a folder called components. And inside this components, there are 2 components here. And then I will be using those components inside this app.js. Don't worry about this structure. I will talk about it when we start coding. Then in the third implementation, I will be using this route DOM package from React. And for that, I will be having 2 pages, one page for listing the physicists. And this page will have one button here for adding a new physicist and an edit button here. When we click the edit, that will direct us to a new page. This page you can see here, it has this / physicist and another / and then an ID. In this page, we can add, edit, or delete a physicist. You can see also here in the VS Code folder that we will be having 2 components, and we will use these 2 components inside the app. And in the app, as I said, we will be using the route package, which will help us redirecting from one page to another. What you need to know here is that all this code will run on the client side. So it will load once and everything will run on the client side. So basically when we are clicking edit or add, this redirecting will not reload new pages from the server. However, it will load the content as needed using JavaScript. So React will intercept those URLs and provide the corresponding content. Communicating with our backend will be done similar to what we've seen before using the fetch function. I will split this tutorial into 2 parts. So in the first part, I will be implementing this first part here, so using one component. In the second part, we will go through the second and third way for implementing our physicist website. So let's start coding. So I already started VS Code and I prepared this folder with12 where I'm going to put our code. So let's start here by opening a terminal. And if you remember from our first video, we need to create a React app. We use the command npx create React app. Then we put the name of the app. So we'll call it physicists implementation 1. And then we will be using use npm as a package manager and click enter. So after a few seconds, the application will be created. You can see here that we have physicist imp1, and inside it we have different files and folders generated by this npx command. However, notice that we have an error here. Let me make this bigger and see what is this error. So as you can see, the error regards this testing library. So we will not be using that. So I will not try to solve this error now. However, look here, we have a suggestion how to install this missing dependency if you need. So let's test our newly created React app. We can start it using npm start and enter. Of course, we need first to be inside the folder. Then we start. So you can see this is our new application here, and it started at port 3000. Let's have a quick look into this folder and do some cleaning for the files which we will not be using. So you can see that here we have the JSON packages. This will keep track of our dependencies and the information of our package. So as you can see here, we have the name, the dependencies, and we have different builds such as debug. Notice that here, these are the installed dependencies. Let's move now. You can also see here that we have a readme file, the package lock.json, the git ignore, and then we have these 3 folders here. So the node model here, our dependencies will be installed, so we will not be touching this folder at all. Inside the public, you can see that we have some icons and some other resources here. So this is the icon which is displayed here, as you can see. So we'll not be using that. We can delete them, but yeah, let me keep them for now. Inside the source, we will have our code. So you can see here there are multiple files. So first the app.css. So this is style sheet for the application. Then the app.js, where we have our main component. So our main component, as you can see here, consists of one function called app, and this function return something which look like an HTML. However, it's not exactly an HTML. So it's the JSX, as we said. So this is something which will be translated using Babel into HTML and rendered on the web page. Then we can see here we have a test, app.test. So as I said, we will not be using that. So let me delete. And we have the index.css, which also define another style sheet. And then we have index.js, which is the main starting point of the application. You can see here we have this React DOM create root, which would create the root of our application, and it would render also here JSX. This JSX contain only one component, which is our application. So we will talk about this later. You can see this is app. This is exactly the name of our function here, app. So basically what's written here will be rendered here in place of this tag. Then we also here we have some code for measuring performance. Let me remove this, and then we also don't need this import here. Let me save, and the web page will be updated, as you can see. Then we have this logo, SVG, and the report web vital, and another setup for the test. Let me delete all this. So this logo.svg is used here. That's not a problem because we will not be using that. Let me remove all this code here, and let's just put one HTML tag, div for example, and just put hello React. And let's remove this here and save, and you can see that now hello React is printed here on our page. If we want to style this page, we can go, for example, here to the app.css. As you can see, there are already here some styles which I will not be using for now. So let me delete them all, and let us add one new style. Let's say for hello message, and let's say that the background here we need it to be black, and then the forecolor is white. And let me save, then back to this app.js. So in a normal HTML, we will put something like a class equal, but since this is a JavaScript file, so the class keyword is reserved. What we should use is this class name, and we can put it to the class which we have just created and save. You can see now the background is black and the text color is white. So since this is a JavaScript file, we can write as usual JavaScript. So for example, we can define a constant, let's say I, and let's give it a value of 10. And then we can even add this to the message, which we are rendering here. To do that, we need to use these curly brackets. What we put inside these curly brackets here will be evaluated. So let's put I now, and let me save, and you can see that React will take the expression inside this curly brackets and execute it, and the returned here it will be 10. That will be rendered in place of these curly brackets. So that's the basic way of using this JSX. So it's really nice and handy to write expression which mix something like HTML, so you can build a UI, and also some JavaScript expressions here. Now let me explain for you the state hooks. Let's say now, for example, that we want to have a button here. So we can write similar to the HTML, a button tag. And let's say that this button is called increase, have a text called increase. When we click this button, we want to increase the value of I. You can see that when I saved, we got an error. That's because the return JSX expression here should have one element in the root, and for that we can either wrap this here in a div, or we can use a dummy root component. So we basically just use these brackets here and the closing bracket and put everything inside them. And let me save. You see it's working now again. And let's come to the button. So the button, we will use the on click. So vscode already suggested that we need to put something here inside this expression. So let me put here that I equal I plus 1, and let's save. And the first error is that we are assigning to a constant variable. So let's use the keyword let here and save. You can see now that the value which we get when we saved is 11, and that's because this expression is really executed when we are rendering. So when rendering, React comes to here and see, okay, I equal I plus 1. That means this I is 11, and then it rendered the result, which is 11. as you can see here. But now let's start clicking on this increase, and we got again an error because onClick is supposed to be a function. We can make that simply by using this arrow expression. So now we have an anonymous function. When it's called, it will execute this instruction here. So let me save, and now you can see that when React renders, this stays 10 because this is a function and we are not calling this function, so we're just defining it. So I will still be 10, and then when React at this line here, the I will be rendered as 10. Now let's click on increase. You can see that the value here is not changing, although the I is changing, and we can make sure of that by simply adding another instruction here, which is a console.log. So let me do that. So here we have this anonymous function. First we put I plus plus, then console log I. And let's open the div tool. So let's click now the increase. You can see it's 11 now, 12, 13, and so on. However, nothing is changing here. So to achieve that, we need to tell React that this I is not a normal variable, it is a state, and that means when this state is changed, everything which is using this state need to be re-rendered. So to do that, we need to use the useState from React. So this is how we import from a JavaScript module, and now can use useState. So let me define I as useState, and then here between the parentheses I put 10. That would be the default value for our state, and we can now go back to const here, and we will use dereferencing. So we'll be using this brackets. So this useState function will return for us a variable to read the state. We called it I, and then a function to set this state. So let me call it set I, and that's it, and save. Now to change the value of I need to use this function set I. So let me do that. Set I to I plus 1. So let me now refresh. First time I click the button, we got here in the output console 10. However, notice here we have hello React 11. So what's happening here is that this set I function is a synchronous function, and that means this function will be called and then JavaScript will move directly to executing the next line even before finishing this function here. And that's why we get here in the output that I is equal 10, and then later when this function has finished and the value of I is set to 11, React will render this div here to 11, and you can see it here. So now the same will happen when we click increase. So you will get here 11, while you can see here it's 12, and so on. I hope that you can notice now that this is very helpful. So we changed a variable which we are using to render the page, and then React has discovered automatically that it needs to re-render this div here without us explicitly saying, please refresh this div. And that's what we were doing before, actually, when we were using plain JavaScript to render our page. So this state would be the basic which we will be building our front end on. So let me start now then building our physicist website. I will do that by start copying the files which we have in the previous tutorial. So let me first create here a folder to hold the server-side code. So I will call it JSS as before. And inside it, I will put our server code, which are 2 JavaScript files, the DB file. I did not change here anything yet. And the index file, where we used the express package to make our application and define these endpoints to list physicists and update them and delete. So the server was running on port 3000, but I changed it now to 3001 since the 3000 port is already used here when we run our React application. So basically this will be serving our front end. And of course, these endpoints here can be now commented because we will not be using any front-end code from this backend anymore. This will be done using now port 3000 and the application running here for React. So let me comment this, and let me also have a second terminal here, and inside this terminal I will move to the server code, then use the node command to run our backend. It will not be running because we still need one JavaScript file, which is the physicist.js. So let me copy this and I will paste it here inside the source, since this will be used by both client side and server side. So putting it here. So now let me try to rerun the backend. So still there are some errors. Let me check. So we need to install this module course this is one thing which I forgot to mention. Here inside index, I also changed this thing here. So I also am using this course, and of course I'm here getting it using require. And this course will allow React to access our endpoint APIs. So let me install this using npm install and then course. So that's it. Let's now try to rerun. And you can see we have a message that the server is running on port 3001. So to list the physicist, we will write the URL, so localhost, and the port, which is 3001, and then the endpoint, which is for listing the physicist. As you can see here, simply /physicists, and let me click enter. And you can see here, this is our list of physicists, same as before. So the back end is working. Let's go back now to the front end. And now I want to copy the HTML and client-side code from the previous tutorial and put them here. So these two folders here, I will delete them later, but now I put them here just for convenience so I can copy pieces of code which I need directly inside our app.js. So this banner.js, I will be skipping for this tutorial here. Let me delete it directly. And from the fill grid, we need this function here, get all. So let me copy this function, and I want to put it inside our app.js here at the top. And let me import the physicist. So now I saved. You can see we have an error here, but don't worry about it. We will correct that. So here we don't have the banner anymore. So we need to have console.log. Let us save. So the error is already corrected, as you can see. So now let me remove this here. And let's render our list of physicists. So we will do that using table as before. So let's write table here. And of course, we will have a header. And inside the header, we will have 5 columns as before. So we have name, year of birth, place of birth, comment, and the actions. If we saved, you can see the columns here. Let me put also the styles for the table here inside our style sheet. And now let us see how we can render the data rows. Let me first put here the body of the table, and then we will need an expression here inside this JSX. This expression, we will use it to render the array of physicists. So first we need to get this array, and for that I will first here define a state, because remember, every time this array of physicists will change, we need to re-render the table, and that will be done automatically for us if we define this array of physicists as a state. So as you can see, again, we are using the use state, and I'm passing as an initial value here is an empty array. So this ph all will be an empty list at the beginning, and we also have this function set all, which we will be using whenever we want to change this list here. I will also use another state to make sure that I'm refreshing this array of physicists only once. So this state, I will call it refresh, and the function for that called set refresh, and it's a boolean. The initial state will be true because I want to refresh, of course. And the logic for refreshing is actually very simple. I will check refresh. So if refresh, so if this variable is true, I will first put it to false. So I will use the function set refresh and put it to false. So we'll make sure later we will not go inside this function again. And then I will use the function get all. So this is the function we copied from the previous tutorial. And as you can see, this function needs a callback, and this callback will be passed the array of physicists, and that's very convenient actually for us. We only need to put this callback to set physicist all, because when we pass the new array to this function, that will trigger a render to any JSX code which is using this ph all array. So now we can use our array here to render the body. So there's a function which will make our job easy. This function called map. So I will write .map, and this map takes one argument, and this argument is a function. So this function can receive two parameters. So the first parameter is an entry of the array, so I will call it physicist, and the second parameter is an index, so I will it idx, and then we will use an arrow, so we'll be writing an anonymous function, and here we can put our JSX to be rendered for the corresponding entry. So let's for now put a table row and one table data, and in this table data I will evaluate physicist.name. So I will be rendering the name of the physicist, and let me save, refresh. You can see that we have an error. So it's saying Teha cannot be a child of T head, and that's because I forgot to put a TR here. Let's save, and if we refresh, so you can see the error is gone. You can see we're still not getting our physicist. That's because we need to change the URL for this fetch. So previously we were just putting /physicists because this was running in the same domain as the backend. But now since we have the backend running on another port, we need to put the full URL. So that would be this part here. Let me save. Let's refresh. You can see now we're already getting 3 physicists, but we are rendering only the name. So we need to render 4 other cells. Let's do that. So now we have the year of birth, place of birth, and the buttons here. There seems to be a problem here with the comment. And this is, as usual, a typo here. This should be comments. So let's refresh. You can see now we have also the comments. The button, we can click them, but there is no handle for the event on click. So let's add that here. So for the first button in edit, we will add on click, as you can see here, an arrow function. It will take this parameter e and it will call set physicist current to physicist, while for the delete button, we will call the function delete physicist to require parameter physicist. So let's first handle this function set physicist. So the idea here is that we will have our input fields here on the top of the list, as I shown in the slides, and I want to re-render them whenever we choose a different physicist. And for that, I will be defining a state called current physicist. So let's do that. So you can see here. So again, we are using useState, and we have a physicist with empty fields, and we get the variable phCurrent and the function setPHCurrent, and this is what we are using here inside the click on the edit. And for the delete physicist, I will just put an empty function for now. I defined an arrow function here, as you can see, called delete physicist, and it does nothing. Let's save. So now you can see we have an error here. It's about the key property. So let's go to the phall.map and let me talk a little bit more about this function. What would happen here is that when we use this function map, that the provided argument here, which is this anonymous function or arrow function, this arrow function will be called n times, where n is the number of physicists in this array here, phall. So now we have 3 physicists. That means this code here will be called 3 times, 1 time for each one of these physicists, and it will also provide the corresponding index. So the index, I think it will start by 0, then 1, 2. We can, of course, render that if you want. Here, we can add it to the name and save. So you can see that Albert Einstein, we have 0, then here 1, and then 2. So let me remove that for now. As you can see, I'm not using this index, but I put it here just so that you know that you can do this. So again, this function is called for each one of these physicists here. And what we are doing is just rendering one row, basically, where for each row we render, as you can see here, these expressions. And then for the last row, which is the actions, we are setting these on click functions. That's it simply. I mean, this is very simple and very nice, and I would say more readable than before. So if you remember our function here, it was called fill grid, and inside this fill grid we had this for loops where we're calling this create element every time and appending it to the corresponding parent element, and then that was for the header. And then again here we have this 2 nested for loops, which was less readable. I mean, clearly you can see that this JSX code is closer to the HTML, so you can really see that you are rendering a row here, and of course you can see also clearly here the expression. So this is really more readable, I would say. So let me render now the upper part here. So I want to put a horizontal separator, HR, and then on top of that I want to add these 5 fields. So let me take them from our HTML page. So remember we had this 4 inputs and these 2 buttons. Let me copy those and just put them here in the top. So you can see we need to change this on click here. So on HTML, this click was all small letters, while in the JSX, this will be camel case. So we need to have a capital C here, and those should be a function name, not a function call. And let me put also like empty functions here for save and cancel. So as you can see here, and let's save and let's check what errors we have. So while in HTML it was accepting that we don't have a closing for this input, it seems that here it's not, which is good. I usually provide those self-closing tags like this, but it seems that I forgot to do this. Sorry for that. And yeah, so let me save now. And you can see we have our 4 inputs here and the buttons and also the horizontal line. We can also, of course, remove those IDs. We are not using them. We can if we want, but yeah, and I forgot to solve this error here. Let me refresh and see. So first thing is that you can see it's complaining about the value of onClick and it's considering this to be a string. So let us replace this with the curly brackets, so to be an expression. And inside it we have the name of the function simply. Now if we save and refresh, the first 2 errors are gone. Now we are back to this key property. So let's go to the map here and let us provide a key. So since this tr is surrounding everything here inside this function, I will add the key here. So this property is simply called key. And I will assign to it the physicist.name, since for us this is the unique identifier. And let me save and refresh. So we are back to no errors, which is good. Now let's start implementing the behavior of the edit button. So when we click this edit button, we want the information of the corresponding physicist to appear here inside those inputs. And for that, we can use the state. So we need here to put the value for this input. So value should be taken from the current physicist, and that's called phcar. If you remember, this is from the use state, and we need to take the name here. And let me save. So you can see now when I click edit that the name will appear here. Let's do the same for the other 3 inputs. So now I update them all. Let me save, and you can see that it's reflected here. However, notice now if I want to change, let's say maybe the comment here, let's say I want to add some text. Now I'm pressing some text. You can see that the comment is not changed, and that's because every time I type something here, the value is changed, and then React is trying to re-render, and then it sees here, okay, look, value is equal phcurrent.name, and that's this value here. So it's basically overriding my changes. So to get my changes to be rendered, I need to use the event onChange, and onChange, as usual, we can put here a function. I will use an anonymous function here using this arrow expression, and this function should change the name of the current physicist. So basically I will use from the state, so we have the function set phcurrent, can put here the new value of the name of the physicist, and that simply by using this curly bracket here to define an object in the name property, the new value of this input. So that would be coming from the event e. Then I have the target. So the target would be the current input, and then I can take the value. So this will work for the name, but since here I did not put the other properties, you will see that will end up weird for the other properties. So now let me change now here for the name. You can see if I added something on the name, is changing. Yeah. And when I click save, now I want to save everything. So let me go now to the save function. Here I just want to log the current physicist, yeah, for now. So phcurrent, and let's see what will happen. Yeah, so I need to put those inside the app component, and let me save. And now let's select Albert Einstein, for example, and let's add changed here and save. And let's look for the development tools. So we got some errors here, and then we have our log here. So as you can see, the current physicist has only the name property, but not the other 3 properties. So let us add these other 3 properties here. So as you can see, the birth year, birthplace, and comments, and we are taking them from the current physicist. And let me save. And now if I changed here, let's say maybe change 2 and click save, you can see the newly logged physicist here have all the values. However, some of them are undefined, as you can see, and that's because, yeah, we will solve that later. But first I want to check those errors here. Let me refresh and see why those errors are appearing. So it's telling us that we provided the value, but we did not provide the onChange. So we need to apply basically the same here, the onChange for the other 3 inputs, and that's why you can see here the number is 3, the number of errors. So let me put this here, and here we want to have the name to be phcurrent.name, and let me copy the same for the other 2 inputs, and let me make this bigger. And notice that we used e.target.value to change the name. Here we need to use it to change birth year, and then here we need to use it to change birthplace, and finally here we need to change the comments. Let's save, refresh, and check. So let's change this here and save. So you can see we don't have any error, and if I made this bigger here, we have all the properties correctly rendered in the onSave. So now let's write the onSave, and for that I will copy from the previous code. So we had this function here on save, save, and yeah, it was an asynchronous function. Let me copy the code. So this is from the previous tutorial and put it as it is here. Let's do the changes here for the banner. We need to change that to console.log and same here. And of course, for the await, this function needs to be async. And we don't need to clear the banner, and we also don't need to define a new physicist because this is already coming from our state. So that's actually all what we need to do. We need to prepare the request and send it to the physicist.update. And of course, we also here need the full URL. So let me correct this. And when the physicist is changed, we need to trigger a refresh. And for that, we can set our refresh variable to true. And that's it. So this is a state variable. When we put it to true, it is changed, and everything which is dependent on it, and that would be our app component, will be rerun, and then it will come here to refresh and will get the array of physicists from the server. Let me save. And now let's test that. So let's select one of the physicists, maybe first one here, and let's change the comment. Let's put only black body radiation, and let's save. And you can see it's already saved. And now no matter how much we refresh, this is saved because we are getting this from the back end. So now the edit here and this save button are both functional. Let's go to the delete. So as you can see, the delete calls this function here, delete physicist, passing the corresponding physicist. And this function we can simply copy also from our previous tutorial. And let's correct it. So here we have ph.name, but here we called it physicist. So let's put it physicist.name. Same here. And now here the request is prepared. Then we are calling the backend. So let's add the missing URL root here. And since this is await, we need to make the function async here. And again, here we get the response, and then we can use console.log and then refresh our list. So set refresh to true. And in case of error, we just log it now to the console. Let's save. There is an error here with the confirm. That's because we need to use the window here. So let's write window.confirm and save. And it appears, yeah, here we're clearing the banner. We need to remove that and save. Let's try to delete one of the physicists. So delete. You can see we get, are you sure you want to delete? We click OK. And you can see the physicist is deleted and the list is refreshed. So edit is working now, only the cancel. And for the cancel, this should be very simple. We only need to set the current physicist to be empty. So let's just put it to new physicist with empty fields and let's save. And now if we click cancel, you can see it's all emptied here. So now we have the full functionality. You can even add a new physicist. So let's do that. So I fill the information of Faraday here and click save. You can see that he's been added here. Let me delete the files which are not needed. So we copied this HTML and this client-side code here. We can delete them. And that's all the file needed for this tutorial. So you can see we have the server-side code here, which also will use this file physicist here. Then for our client side, or our code is inside this app.js. I see that we have also here db.js. This is not required. Let me delete it. And you can see our application still work. And also this index copy here. So inside the source, we only need this physicist, which we copied from the previous tutorial. And then all our front end code we put inside this app.js. Let me make this bigger. So we had this get function, get all function, copied from the previous tutorial. Then we defined some states here using this function here from React. And then we had also some functions like save and delete, which we copied from the previous tutorial. And finally, we had our logic to refresh here and render our page. And that's all what I wanted to show for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe and like. And I hope to see you in the next part of this tutorial, where I will show two different variants of this implementation. Bye.